Hey, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Brad. On this episode, we're going to be talking about something that's really important, and we need to stop doing it right this second, and that is overthinking. Guys, far too many of you are being stuck. You're being held hostage in your business and your life, for that matter, by overthinking about everything that you're doing. So we're going to break down some of this on this episode because this is something that I see a lot, and I tend to see it more and more in contractors that are overthinking every aspect of their business and they're stuck. And so let's get into this right now. Now, a lot of the stuff that I'll talk about is going to come from the book Soundtracks by John Acuff. I'll put a link in the show notes. But this book is really about soundtracks, which we'll dive into here in a second. But the soundtracks are what is the, if you will, is like the guiding light of why we overthink and what we overthink about. And so a soundtrack is a set of words or phrases or thoughts that we play over and over and over in our head that act as a compass, a guiding light into what we do. Now there's good soundtracks and there's bad soundtracks, right? We can look at good soundtracks as things like, it could be, if you're spiritual, it could be like the 10 Commandments. These are our guiding lights. Thou shalt not, commit adultery. Okay, that's a commandment, but it's also a soundtrack. So if I get into a situation where there's a pretty woman and my wife's not around, like that soundtrack plays, don't commit adultery, right? You love your wife, blah, blah, blah. Like that can protect me. It's a good soundtrack. It's there to help us stay out of trouble. But most of the soundtracks that we have are actually negative, and it's what keep us stuck. Now, there's this thing called intergenerational soundtracks. Okay. And in this book, he talks about it. In chapter 2, he's talking about the past. Let me look at here. I'm sorry, chapter 3, or no, the chapter 2, the soundtracks of our past. This is a really good chapter because he really breaks down how the influence of our childhood is what controls our future. The experiences of our childhood influence our present. The power of narrative, identifying root causes, because this is really important, and breaking generational patterns. And so in this chapter, he's talking about the concept of intergenerational transmission of beliefs and behaviors. And we see this, it's pretty common. If you grew up in a religious household, if your parents were Christians, then more than likely you're going to be a Christian as well. Or if they grow up Republican, more than likely you'll grow up Republican, so on and so on. If they grow up liking the Reds, more than likely you're going to like the Reds too, right? Like this is the intergenerational transmission of beliefs and behaviors. This is also why experts say, like, your environment can also dictate your success in life. And so we look at like underprivileged. The term underprivileged comes in where we talk about certain areas that are underprivileged. They don't get to experience different things. And there is truth in all of that. But none of those things can keep us stuck unless we let it, right? And so the problem is not that you grew up with a bad childhood. The problem is that you're still using the soundtracks that you had as a child to run your life as an adult. Now, a recovering overthinker, okay? So I like to overthink everything. And there are definitely times where it's beneficial, but a lot of times it's not. And most of the time it's not. There's another book that I would recommend. It's called Don't Believe Everything You Think. And I don't have the author in front of me, but I can put a link to that in the show notes too. That's more about overthinking and kind of what causes it. And then John's book Soundtracks is more about the little soundtracks that we hold on to that kind of narrate and control our lives. And those two things together create this ultimate handcuff that we put on ourselves, which usually leads to anxiety and overthinking, right? So we got to try and stop this. Now, this is prompted. I had a conversation with one of my clients. We had a one-to-one meeting this morning, and he is a good contractor that provides good services, who's handcuffed by trying to be a people pleaser. And so there's a lot of fear in that of, I don't want to make a mistake because I don't want X to happen. I don't want people to think I'm a bad person. I don't want people to think I'm a crook. I don't want people to think I'm not reliable or not trustworthy. And so I have to overthink every scenario in order to prevent things from happening. Okay. This is common. I see this a lot with people. There's usually there's all kinds of the spectrum on this. But what I see a lot with contractors is they're either really on the high end of being a people pleaser, or they're on the low end of that, which is they don't care enough, right? So like, you either care way too much or you don't care enough. There's a happy medium in there that you got to try and find. For overthinkers, let's just define this. For example, in that book, Don't Believe Everything You Think. If you think about something more than one time, you are overthinking. Now, for a lot of you that just heard me say that, you are probably like, that's like everything I do all day, every day. I overthink everything. Yes, if you think about something more than one time, you're overthinking. Now, think about this for a second and don't overthink it. Only think about it one time. If you do something more than once, are you repeating it? Right? If you set a tile on the floor and then you don't like the way it looks, and so you pull the tile up and then you reset that tile, did you not just redo that? Right? Now, we're not talking about whether or not it's right or not. We're just talking about the act of redoing something. And so if you're redoing it, you're overdoing it. Now, if you pull that tile up again because it's not perfect, like in your mind it's not perfect, and you redo it and you don't like it, and you pull it up and you redo it 4 or 5 times because you want it to be perfect, are you not overdoing it? Would most people not say that you're overdoing that? It's no different than your thoughts. So when you think about something more than once, and really chronically, what's the word? Is that word? Yeah, chronically. I think that's right. If you Words are tough. If you think about it too much, right, or it's chronic, meaning you do it repeatedly over and over and over, then that's an even a bigger problem. It's a more severe problem. And so we have to really understand, and this is where lately in the Prophet Club, we've been doing a lot of mindset work on awareness. It's absolutely critical for you to develop a high sense of awareness of what you do, think, say, all of that. When you become hyper aware of what you do, you can identify things that are going on. And then once you have awareness, now you have options. See, if you're not aware of something, you don't have any options. If you don't know that you snore at night and your spouse never tells you, you're not aware of it, right? So you don't even know what you need to be. You don't even know you need to fix it. But if your wife or your spouse is like, hey, you snore at night, there's something wrong with you, or you need to get help. Now you have awareness. Now you have options. What's my options? Do I put tape over my mouth? Do I use a device? Do I get a CPAP? Do I have a study done? Like, what do I need to do? Right? Without the awareness, you don't have options. So if you have awareness around overthinking, now you have options on how to control that. Now, a lot of you don't think it's overthinking. And by the way, overthinking is a form of anxiety. If you didn't know this, overthinking is a form of anxiety. Okay? So if you are overthinking a lot, you probably have high anxiety. And one thing that, I didn't realize this until recently, is that there's different forms of anxiety. There's different forms of stress, right? I never thought I had anxiety until I was talking with my therapist, and they're like, yeah, if you're overthinking, that's a form of anxiety. I'm like, well, I never thought about that. I mean, I think about all the stuff all the time, but I never thought that was anxiety. So anxiety is not like you have this physical reaction to where you're having a panic attack or anything like that, right? Anxiety is just, there's a level of stress in your body that you may or may not be aware of that's affecting you on a daily basis. So overthinking is a form of anxiety. So let's go back to soundtracks for a second. Soundtracks are just the words or phrases. Now, we hear them all from our grandparents and from people. Early bird gets the worm, right? If you're not 5 minutes early, you're late. All these different phrases, these soundtracks that we hear and then we adopt. We hear someone say, early bird gets the worm. And we go, you know what? I like that. I like being early. I'm going to adopt that into my life, and that's going to be my mantra for everything. So I have to get up early every day. I have to get up at 4 a.m. every day because early bird gets the worm. Right? Now let's break that soundtrack down for a second. Is that true? Is it true that the early bird gets the worm? Has there ever been a successful person in life that doesn't get up early? Well, if you look, there's lots of, if you do some research, you will find there's lots of people that don't get up early. If you listen to Alex Hormozy, he'll tell you that he doesn't even have an alarm clock. He just gets up whenever he gets up. Now he has his body rhythm that gets him up around the same time, but he doesn't get up early. So if he's successful, then that phrase isn't universally successful. It could be helpful, but it doesn't mean that it is the only way to do something, right? So we can go through a whole life saying the early bird gets the worm and we got to get up early every day. And maybe you're not an early person. Maybe you like to be a night owl. Maybe you like to stay up late and you hate getting up early, but that phrase plays in your head, early bird gets the worm. My grandpa used to say early bird gets the worm. So I got to get up at 5 a.m. even though it's not optimal for me and how I live. I'm going to do it because that's just the phrase, the soundtrack that I adopted, right? Now, let's look at something else here. What could that possibly mean? Early bird gets the worm. It doesn't imply necessarily that it's a time frame in the morning. It could potentially imply that being early to something. So if you're 10 minutes early to an appointment, if you're 10 minutes early to an event, then you're going to get the worm there because you're the first one there. You get first dibs on anything that's at this event. So it may not even be a time frame in the morning. In other words, what time you get up. What if, and I don't know this, but what if the intention of that was to say, be early everywhere you go and had nothing to do with the time frame in the day? But we take it and apply it to our life as a time frame of we got to get up early in the morning. And that's never what it was intended for. And we live our entire life believing that and structuring our life around something that was never even intended for that because we believed it. And that's the soundtrack that we play. Do you see how this stuff has a huge impact whenever we don't understand like the full ramification of the words that we say and the thoughts that we have? There's countless phrases. If I were to interview every one of you listening, you could tell me a phrase or a saying that your grandparents or your parents or siblings or somebody you know said over and over and over, right? And then you attached that, you latched onto it, and you applied it in your life. There's a phrase I used to hear, and I believed it to the point to where I was like depressed, but it was like, you learn in your 20s and you earn in your 30s. So you're supposed to learn everything you need to know in your 20s and then earn all of your money in the 30s. I believed it. So, in my 30s, when I didn't have as much success as I wanted to have, I felt like, it was too late. You get into your 40s, it's too late. I missed my opportunity. I had to make all my millions in my 30s, so I'm too late. That's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous soundtrack. There's people that become wealthy or make their money in the 60s or when they're 70s or when in their 80s. Like there's no specific time frame to that. But if you adopt that soundtrack and you believe it, as you get older and older in your 30s, you start to get depressed and depressed and depressed because you haven't reached this goal or this belief that you had based on a soundtrack that some person said one time because it worked out for them. You see how powerful this stuff is? All of us have these beliefs and soundtracks that we listen to. And so we say, learn in your 20s, earn in your 30s. That's the soundtrack. So then how do we overthink this? We do a deal with someone and they tell us that we're too expensive, right? And so now we start overthinking. Well, how can am I too expensive? I don't think my prices are too high. I pay my guys well. Maybe I missed something on this bid. Maybe I need to go back and look at everything. Well, maybe I need to lower my prices to stay competitive. Maybe the market's changed. Oh, I know what it is. It's the election year, so people are holding on to their money. So I just can't charge that much. Well, I don't know if that's true or not because I sold a job last week for the same amount and they didn't have a problem. Well, maybe I just didn't do good at sales on this one. Maybe I need to get sales training. You can just go on and on and on and on and on, overthinking this scenario because a client said that your price was too expensive. Instead of just saying, oh, I guess we're too expensive for them. Let's move on to the next one. That's what a normal brain would do. I guess we're too expensive for them. On to the next one. An overthinker just does the exercise I just did. What did I do wrong? What could I have said differently? I'll share with you a personal experience. And this happened 3 years ago. One of my good lifelong friends of 30 plus years was killed in a motorcycle accident. And they had a celebration of life, after his passing. And they had, anybody want to come up and say, things about him and share their stories. And so I had planned on saying some stuff. And I had six memories that I wanted to share over our lifetime. And I just had on my phone, I just had like bullet points. Like one was like sailboating, another was blender, like just words to trigger the memory. And then I was just going to ad lib the rest of it, which was not a problem. So I get up there and I do the whole thing, right? I go through all my stuff. And at the end, I was done. And people enjoyed it. Like afterwards, people said they enjoyed it. For the next week after this celebration of life, for the next week, a lot of times when I was in the shower, but even throughout the day, I replayed what I said in my head. And this is not an exaggeration, probably close to 1,000 times. Just replayed it. Man, I should have said this there. I could have said that. I should have brought up this part. I should have planned ahead of time. And just replayed it over and over and over in my head as if some way I could go back into the past and change it in order to honor my friend in an even, more elegant or better way than I did. Right? That is overthinking to the T. It consumed me for many, many days after that event. Hey, just a quick time out from the show. If you're a frustrated contractor who's dealing with low profit margins, stuck working on the tools every day, or doing free estimates for people who are never going to hire you in the first place, I invite you to my private contractor community, the Profit Club, where contractors just like you are adding 2 to 3 times more profit each year without producing any more jobs and finally getting completely off the tools to never do another free estimate again. So if you're ready to increase your profits, stop doing free estimates and get off the tools, then all you have to do is click the link in the show notes to learn more about the Profit Club and see how it can easily 2 to 3 times the cash in your pocket, give you a proven sales process that will convert more jobs with ease and get you off the tools once and for all. And the best part is you can do all of this without having to produce more jobs than you currently are. Click the link to learn more. Now let's get back to the show. It was also a trigger of awareness for me as I was on this, learning more about awareness and stuff, that eventually I was like, why am I overthinking this? Why am I thinking this? But that is an example of, it's in the past. Like there's nothing I could have done. I can't change it. It's over. And just so you guys know, if you live in the past, that's where depression comes from. Depression comes from the past. Anxiety comes from the future. So if you're worrying about stuff that's going to happen, that's where anxiety comes from. If you're thinking about stuff that happened in the past, that's where depression comes from. Now, I'm not a doctor, and there's people that could probably tell you that those are completely wrong and false, and that's not true. But just based on the information that I've received and the research I've done, that is mostly true. There's always outliers to everything, right? But anxiety comes from a perceived event in the future. So, like, we really need to be present every day with what we do. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with reviewing things. There's nothing wrong with reflection. There's nothing wrong if you play a game on the next day, you watch tape to see what you did right or wrong. That's not overthinking, right? You're doing it for the purpose of getting better, right? But thinking about what you said and how you said it, and if it's the right way to say it, to over multiple days, that is a clear sign of overthinking. So if you guys are doing this, you have to stop. Now, I'm not an expert in this, so go read the book Soundtracks by John Acuff and read that other book, Don't Believe Everything You're Thinking. He dives more into the whole, we hear a phrase and we apply it in our life. Like, don't believe that. Just because you think that, don't believe it to be true. And he dives into that. So these two books together will really give you a good understanding about this. But how does this apply in our business? So I was talking to my client, and he says, I really need to hire an assistant. I really need to get someone in to help answer the phones and take care of some stuff. I said, cool, I understand. It's a good idea. And then the overthinking begins, right? Well, all I have right now is I got to have them in person. But, they got to be in person so I can talk to them and be able to figure that out. And you mentioned that you had someone working in your house, and my office is in my basement, but my wife is really not comfortable with having someone in our house, which that's fair. That's a valid point. And then we go on and talk about I have a garage that I can convert into some offices, and we can have someone there. And in this contractor's mind, we're laying out the case like it's a trial of why we need to do 18 different things before the situation is perfect to hire someone. Because I don't want to hire someone and then, look like a fool, or they realize that I'm really unorganized, or they think that I don't know what I'm doing, or that I'm not smart, or I don't have I'm not a good boss. Like, I don't want anybody to think that. So before I hire someone, I got to spend, $15,000 in 3 months doing all of this work just so I can hire that person. And that is not true. That's not true at all. There's so many incorrect beliefs in that thinking. That's not true. But the overthinking part of the brain is going to keep you from ever doing it. Because here's what happens. I got to remodel a garage and turn it into an office. That is not an easy task, right? Even if you had a full staff of experts who go in there, it's still probably at least 3 weeks, give or take, before you can get that thing ready. And then what do you got to do? Well, now you got to buy a desk for them, and now you got to buy a computer for them, and a phone, and if it doesn't have air conditioner, you got to make sure it's air conditioning, and now you got to do all this, and you got to run all of a sudden you spent $15,000 in 3 weeks just to get ready to hire someone, right? Because you believe if you don't, it's going to cause all these problems. And I told him, I said, look, you're overthinking this. Go hire a virtual assistant. If you can't do a virtual assistant, someone who can work, over the phone or over the internet, then hire someone that can work remotely, that can work from their house, even if they're local, and just have them come to you a few hours a week in person, and then they do the rest of their work at their house, right? Like they only come to your office in your house when you're home. When you're not home, they're not there. Like you don't have to have all of this stuff figured out before you take action. But this overthinking keeps us paralyzed. And a lot of you listening to this are paralyzed in your business because you're too scared to take an action and make a mistake. And I told him, I said, listen, you don't have to get organized in order to hire a person. You're hiring the person to help you get organized. You see the difference here? Your anxiety and your overthinking is making you believe that you have to have the perfect scenario for them to come on board, instead of just telling them, this is what I'm trying to accomplish and this is why I need your help, and then letting them, who is a better expert at it than you, help you create the scenario, the best scenario. And here's another overthinking. Nobody wants to work part-time. I can only hire them full-time. That's a lie. There's lots of stay-at-home moms and teachers who don't work in the summer and people who are looking for part-time work. There's lots of people that will work from home. There's lots of people who will work a third shift, right? Work third shift. Like all of these thoughts and beliefs that you have, like, oh, no, it's got to be the perfect shift. I got to have the perfect office. It's got to be Monday through Friday. It's got to be 8 to 5. It's got to be in all these parameters before I can hire them. And all you're doing is setting yourself up for failure by procrastinating longer. Just start taking massive action and then figure it out as you go. When I hired Andrew, who's my intern, I'd never hired an intern before. I didn't even know how to do the process. My wife, who works at the university where we got the intern from, she's like, I know someone who works in admissions and deals with this. I said, great. They sent an email. I emailed them back and said, hey, I'm looking for an intern. I have no idea how to do it. And they said, no problem. Here's typically how it goes. Here's what other employers do. Here's how this thing, lays out. Here's what they may or may not pay. You just need to let me know these things. And then we'll get you set up and we'll put you on this app that you can post jobs and this and this. And they walked me through the entire process. And then I went and I posted a job. I had 2 people apply. I interviewed both of them and I hired Andrew, who's helping me right now. I had no idea how to do any of that before I started. None. But I didn't go and do 80 hours of research and, ponder over it. Pontification. I think it's pontification. I didn't pontificate over it. I didn't think about it I don't know why I try to use really big words when I can't even say simple words. Anyways, I tried to think about it, right? I didn't think about it for long periods of time. I just said, I want this. I need this. Let's take action. That's how some of you need to do your business, because you're so freaking worried about, well, what if I get a bad review, Brad? What if someone actually says something bad about me? I won't be able to sleep at night. I'll just die inside if someone says you're a crook. I just can't bear to think that. Right? Okay, perfect. Keep undercharging, keep being broke, keep working 80 hours a week, keep being miserable, keep never seeing your family. It sounds like a perfect idea. Just keep doing those things because you're afraid someone might say you're a crook. That sounds like a perfect way to run a business. Guys, you have to start taking action. Stop living on the fence. Stop living in the neutral zone. Go on the attack. Cross the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. Go into the invading country or invade the country or whatever, attack. Like, just take action and then figure it out as you go. Yes, you can take a little bit of, obviously you don't want to go and do something that you're not even qualified to do. You don't go jump in the deep end if you can't swim, but you don't go take swimming lessons for 5 years before you jump in the deep end. You go take swimming lessons for 1 day, you learn how to swim a little bit, and then you jump in. That's the difference. Some of you guys are still taking swimming lessons 35 years later because you're afraid to jump in the deep end. You just got to do the bare minimum, the minimum viability of research, the minimum viability of prep, and then take action. Because I promise you, if you overanalyze it and overthink it, the longer you wait, the harder it gets. The more you analyze, the more what if scenarios come into play, the less likely you are to take action. If you're an overthinker, the best thing you can do is as soon as somebody says something, just take action immediately without even thinking about it. It will scare the crap out of you. But as soon as you do it and nothing bad happens, you'll be like, huh, that's crazy. I didn't think about this. I didn't overthink about it and nothing bad happened. I should try this more often. So I want you guys to start taking action. If you're an overthinker, stop overthinking. If you think about it more than once, you're an overthinker. Period. You can't hide from it. If you're thinking about, well, what if this and what if that and what if this, and I got this text from a customer who the text seems like they're asking me a question. So let me think about every possible scenario of what they're trying to imply here and spend 2 days antagonizing and stressed out over it instead of, I don't know, let's just pick up the phone and call them and say, what do you mean? You said you don't understand why it's taken so long, right? The text says, hey, Brad, I've just got a question here. I'm a little confused. Why is the job taking so long? Oh my gosh. I get this text when I'm driving home one evening at 5 p.m. And so I stay up all night thinking about this text. I don't understand. I mean, I told him it was going to be 3 weeks. We're right on schedule. I've been telling him all the time this and this and this, and I've been giving them feedback and communicating. And what can that mean? I mean, I don't understand. You guys just you let it ruin your entire freaking evening. Instead of picking up the damn phone and saying, hey, Cindy, I got your text. I was just curious. You said you were curious why it's taking so long. What did you mean by that? Oh, I was talking about the response to the email I sent you. I emailed you earlier this morning and I said, hey, do you know when the paint's going to be in? Do you know when the paint's supposed to come in? And that's what I was talking about, that email I sent you. And you're like, oh, well, I thought I responded to your email, right? And she goes, well, I don't know. I went, oh, you know what? You sure did. I didn't see the email. That's my fault. I'm so sorry. And then you just spent your entire night because you worried and stressed out about what that person said instead of just freaking picking up the phone and calling them right that second and asking them. Get clarity. This is the awareness part, remember? If you have more awareness of what they're actually saying, then you can't use your brain to fill in all of the unknowns. You're trying to solve for X when you don't even know what Y is, right? You have Z. I guess it would be X, Y, and Z. You'd solve for Z. Anyways, you're trying to solve for Z. You only have Y and you don't even know what X is. In a math formula, that's stupid, right? Because you don't have enough information. So pick up the damn phone and call and find the information instead of trying to solve for stuff with half of the information. And you guys know exactly what I'm talking about because you do this all the freaking time. You send your employee a text and they respond to you, and the text is like, it sounds really bad. It sounds really bad, and you internalize that. It's like, man, they're being extremely disrespectful. They're being really disrespectful. I'm about ready to fire this person because I don't like the way he said that, and I'm just, nobody talks to me like that. And then you're fired up for half the day, and at the end of the day, you go talk to him, and you're like, hey, I need to talk to you, Chris. You sent me that text earlier, and that is completely unacceptable. And he's like, what text? Well, you sent this text to me. And he's like, well, didn't you get the text right after? You're like, no, I only got this one text. Oh, wait, it was autocorrect. That's not what I said. I sent you a text after because it was, it autocorrected the wrong thing. And I even had a laugh emoji and everything. And he shows you his phone. And sure enough, there's a second text message that was supposed to go out, but you didn't get it. And you got the first one. And it was just a misunderstanding. And you're on the verge of firing this guy because you didn't take action immediately and you overthought about it for freaking 4 hours. That's the stupid stuff that we do. We do that on a regular basis, and we're worried about why we don't understand why we're stressed out all the time. because we create so many conflict and problems in our brain because we overthink it, because we're too scared we think it's creating conflict. I don't want to create conflict, Brad. I'm a people pleaser and I don't want to create any kind of conflict. Well, guess what? It's not conflict if you're just trying to get clarification. Hey, why'd you send me this text? I don't understand, right? What did you mean by why is it taking so long? Just get clarity, guys. Get awareness around stuff and stop overthinking every freaking thing you do. I promise if you do this, your life will be much more enjoyable. And by the way, the reason why you overthink is because it's a response to childhood trauma. You are trying to prevent something bad from happening to you because something bad happened to you as a child, and you're trying to prevent it through overthinking, through micromanaging, through compulsive disorder of trying to control everything, right? You're essentially trying to prevent the bad thing from happening to you when you were a child by overthinking and overdoing stuff. So you need to go talk to a therapist if you have this issue. It's clearly a past trauma response to stuff. So go talk to a therapist. Seriously, this isn't about I'm a tough man and I don't go do all that stuff. No, that's stupid. I served in the military. I do competitive pistol shooting. I do lots of men stuff. I've done lots of cool things that would be defined as a tough man. I go see therapists because it's the right thing to do. It's stupid. By the way, that's another soundtrack. You see how stupid that is? That's a soundtrack. Tough guys don't go see therapists. That's a soundtrack that some idiot believed and you adopted it. Right? Well, what if I go to a therapist and they say I'm crazy? That's a soundtrack you adopted somewhere and believed it. Deal with your stuff, guys. Go deal with it. Stop procrastinating on it. Stop overthinking about going and getting help. just do it. Just take action. All right. That's all I got. Hopefully this is helpful, guys. It's just something that was on my heart to share because I see it a lot, and overthinking is a real issue for a lot of guys. If you stop overthinking, your life will get a lot less stressful. I promise you. If I can help you with anything in your business, pricing, therapy, whatever, I was joking. Sometimes I get done with some of these calls and I feel like a therapist myself, but I enjoy doing it because that's part of the process of helping people become the best version of themselves, right? This is about self-mastery. Everything I do is about self-mastery. It's about helping you be the best version of yourself. I tell my son almost every morning, be the best version of you, right? And that's what you guys should be doing too. If you're not actively seeking ways that you can improve yourself and actively becoming aware of things that's holding you back, then you're not on a journey of self-mastery. If you want help with that, let me know. I'll be glad to do it. You know where to find me on the socials. Just search for the Hammer and Grind podcast. And remember, until next time, guys, profit is not a dirty word.